Hey, everybody. You can help us make Chris DeMakes a podcast even better by telling us a little bit about yourself. Go to surveymonkey.com/r/JDZ3HL7 for a quick listener survey. It only takes a couple minutes and it helps support our team. To show our appreciation, we're giving away 2 $50 gift cards to lucky participants every single month. Head to, go ahead and grab a pen, surveymonkey.com/r/JDZ3HL7 now for your chance to win.
Google is offering free AI training and tools to U.S. small businesses so they can innovate in ways both big and small. Built by Google experts, the Google AI Professional Certificate equips small businesses with practical AI skills. Through hands-on projects, they can start using AI to get more done and unlock new opportunities for their business. This is a new era of American innovation. Find out more at grow.google/business.
You say it's your first time backstage at the Troubadour.
Hey everybody, today's guest is Joel Reeder, bassist and vocalist for the San Francisco Bay Area punk rockers, the Plus Ones. Together we peel back the covers and dive deep into the writing, recording, and inspiration behind the fan favorite song, All the Boys, taken from their 2002 album, It's a Calling. I've known Joel since last century, first meeting him when he was the then new bassist for the Mr. T Experience, and it was really cool to catch up today. Joel mentioned that All the Boys was biographical, only in the sense that he was playing all the same places that his heroes played, and he was channeling his take on their backstage exploits. Joel was quick to point out that this was one of the first songs he wrote while starting this project, and it's really just a simple 3-chord punk rock song that turned into a whole other animal. 2 years after the song's release, it was featured on the TV show The OC, and the story? Well, it's almost too hard to believe. All the Boys also ties in Dr. Dre, a famous world-class music mastering guru, and David Foster, the producer responsible for the many successes of the band Chicago. How, you ask? Well, you're just gonna have to stick around to find out.
Hey, have you heard? Chris DeMakes a podcast. Hey, have you heard? Chris DeMakes a podcast. Hey, have you heard? Chris DeMakes a podcast. Hey, have you heard? Chris DeMakes a podcast.
My old friend Joel, I can't believe it. You said it before we started rolling that it's been going on like 3 decades since we've actually seen each other, and I started to think there's no way, and then I was like, yep, I think it's been about that long, so it's good to see your face.
Chris, it's an amazing honor to be here with you today. I'm so excited to see you again, too.
Awesome. For a little history of Joel and I, Joel joined the Mr. T Experience. Past Chris DeMakes a podcast guest, we had Dr. Frank on here. You joined in 94 when you were 17 as bassist and background vocalist. And when I first met you around 96, 97, you rivaled our bass player Roger in skinniness. If you turned sideways, you could hardly see you at that point. But you were this wiry, skinny kid, and you just had the biggest, brightest eyes. You know, we had a couple years on you, but the years that we did have, looking back, my gosh, you were just so, like, you were living what I would consider the dream, right?
It was sort of a punk rock Cinderella story for sure, because I was about the world's biggest fan of the Mr. T Experience when I joined, and those guys had a good decade and a half on me, so it was a unique set of circumstances that led me to being a member of that band. It was something right out of a rock and roll fantasy, you know, like skinny kid with stars in his eyes meets his idols, and I just had the gumption to ask what was, you know, going on with their band, and they said, our bass player just quit, so not a lot right now. And I said, I play bass, you know. I know all your songs already, and the rest was history.
What was that like telling your family, hey, I'm going to go get in a van with these 30-year-old guys? You're 17. Like, was there some like raised eyebrows?
They were shockingly supportive. I'm the youngest of three. I have two older sisters, and they always complain that I got preferential treatment as being not only the baby of the family, but also the only boy. But I think really what it was is that I was a really well-behaved child. I was a goody two-shoes. I was a serious student, and I never got in any trouble. So I really had earned the benefit of the doubt. So when I was a senior in high school and 17 years old, and I told my mom and my dad that I was going to be commuting an hour each way from where I grew up outside of Santa Cruz to Oakland, California, to rehearse with this band of adults, they sort of shrugged their shoulders and said, like, all right, we've learned that we can trust you. But it really was, like, in hindsight, I mean, also, you know, this was the mid-'90s, you know, and they were, maybe, you know, you do benefit from being the last of your siblings. By then, they'd seen it all, and they're ready to, I think, let go of the rope as far as parenting is concerned. But my father took Dr. Frank aside at one point and had a conversation with him man-to-man, saying, I'm entrusting you with the safety of my son, but I know that he's in good hands. And after that, I was in the van and on tour starting from my spring break of my senior year. That's when I started touring with MTX.
I love that. That's amazing, because I could imagine going back in time and being that young. I kind of followed the same path you did. My parents trusted me. They probably would have been cool with it, but you know, they probably would have, like your dad did, had to meet somebody in the band. But also, Joel, looking back, you didn't look out of place to me back then. Maybe if I was to go back in time and be an adult, you know, a grown man looking back, oh God, what's this kid doing with these grown men? But you didn't seem out of place at all. You seem like you fit right in.
Yeah, I felt like it was not a peer-to-peer relationship with those guys in the band, but it wasn't a paternal relationship. It was more like they were the master craftsman and I was the apprentice. That was kind of the dynamic, you know?
Gotcha. Well, we're going to talk about a song today called All the Boys from the Plus Ones. And I imagine this song, what it sounds like, because it got picked up by some pretty cool things. We're going to get into all of that in a little bit. But this is just, I think, another song that you wrote, right? That you threw out there, and look what happened to it. I tell this to songwriters all the time in bands, especially now with TikTok and all. You know, you never know what's going to get out there and blow up. That you know, just keep writing. You never know what song's going to be it. In fact, I've had, you know, huge artists on here talking about massive hit songs that almost got left off the record. You know, it's like, yeah, no one believed in this one, and it ended up being the hit. So take us back to writing All the Boys.
All the Boys, if it's not the first song that I ever wrote on my own, I think it might literally be the second song that I ever composed. It was an extremely early songwriting effort. I was probably 19 years old when I sat down and wrote this song, and I was still finding my voice literally and figuratively, both as a songwriter and as someone who was singing lead for the first time instead of backing vocals. So it is essentially an experiment. I was given a gift by my mom and dad a book on how to be a better lyric writer, and it had a series of prompts that told you, if you're just getting started as a songwriter, try this as an experiment to get your creative juices flowing. And one was take a familiar melody and write a new set of lyrics to it. And so I took this tune, which is based on a melody from a song in 1833 called Long, Long Ago by English composer Thomas Haynes Bailey. And I was familiar with it from when I was a youth and I was playing cello in the Suzuki method. So I was 4 years old and my mom stuck a quarter-sized cello in my hands. And this was a song that you learned to get your left hand fingering down for the first time, and it had been stuck in my brain ever since. And I did a slight variation on this classical melody, essentially, and I just came up with some lyrics over it and put it to a 3-chord punk rock format.
That is awesome, because you listed a bunch of songs in your notes that you had sent over, and I've never really thought about that. Yeah, we've had songs on here that have, artists have sampled, or, hey, I took this line from this band, but it seemed to be rock and roll centric. I maybe am forgetting a few. I've done a lot of episodes here. Maybe there was something along these lines, but that's really cool that you took something from your youth that it sounds like you kind of begrudgingly went into cello lessons, and here all these years later, you're like, oh, that melody, I'm gonna stick this in a punk rock song.
I was always grateful that I had a musical background. Like, I grew up in a very musical household, but it was not a rock and roll household. My parents didn't have any rock and roll records in their collection at all. So I had to discover rock and roll and punk rock and underground music through my older sisters. And they were the ones who went off to college and came home with these really cool underground records. We grew up just outside of the Bay Area. My older sister went to UC Berkeley and started going to shows at Gilman Street. So she's the one who brought home all the Lookout Records bands and was the one who introduced me to Green Day and Operation Ivy and the Mr. T Experience, which is how I knew about them in the first place. And so I didn't have a background in rock and roll. I had classical background, but I was grateful for that, even though it took me until my middle school years to realize that was not the music that spoke to me, and I was not interested in pursuing that. But I'm glad it gave me a foundation for what I continue to do with my life to this day. And you just never know where inspiration's going to come from. And this was a remnant of those early years of lessons.
I love that. I took piano lessons as a kid. I know a lot of punk rock guys that took lessons. I begrudgingly went into my lessons. I didn't want to, but looking back, I enjoyed it. I didn't think I did. I learned more than I thought, just putting chords together and such. But I want to talk about the Plus Ones a little bit. You guys formed as a 3-piece in 1998. Joel, you were on bass, and you were joined by Scotty Hayes on guitar and vocals, and Dan Panic, which I've known about Dan forever. Of course, he was the drummer in Screeching Weasel. So this seemed like it was you had just left Mr. T and formed this band. Now, I remember the Plus Ones because you guys released the album It's a Calling on Asian Man Records in March of 2002. All the Boys is on that album. It's the second track out of 11 on the record. I remember the band name. I did not know you were in the band. This was a real surprise when Chris told me that you were in the Plus Ones. So this is cool to go back and get this whole backstory. The album was recorded in San Francisco at Toast Studios, and here's another blast from the past. It was produced by Robert Shimp, who I believe Robert, because you had listed here Mr. T Experience and the Donnas, but I think he also recorded the Skank and Pickle records, and I was a big fan of that band. But a lot of dots to connect here. But let's go back to the formation. You left Mr. T, and you formed the Plus Ones. Was Dan living out in the Bay Area, or was he still in Chicago?
By this point, Dan had moved to the Bay Area. He had left Screeching Weasel and had joined the Groovy Ghoulies, which is what brought him out to the West Coast. And he and I had toured together many times because the Mr. T Experience had toured with the Riverdales, which was the Screeching Weasel offshoot band that Dan was also in. And then when we were on tour behind the MTX record, Revenge is Sweet and So Are You, the Groovy Ghoulies were the opening band for a 2-month U.S. tour and then subsequently a 2-month European tour back-to-back. And we were in the same van together for half a year, essentially. So he and I got very tight over that. And if anyone is a fan of those bands, they know that he's a monster drummer. And so he and I being in the band together kind of made it sort of almost a pop-punk supergroup. But I don't want to undersell Scotty's contributions to the band because he's only a year or two younger than me, but he came from an East Bay band where they were sort of child prodigies themselves. They were high school kids. This band called the Struggle Buggies, who were sort of like a junior version of Rancid. And he was just always like the super cute front person with his bleach blonde hair and his creepers, but he could rip it up. And he worked at the really cool vintage guitar store in Berkeley. And I remember really nervously going in one day specifically to try to talk him into joining my MTX side project band. And it was like asking out, an attractive girl on a date for the first time. I, hemmed and hawed and said, so I'm starting this band of my own, and I don't know if you know of any guitar players who might be interested. And he's like, are you trying to ask me if you want to join the band? And I said, I am, actually. And having him on board really solidified everything. But there was some crossover. Like I know you said I left MTX and formed the Plus Ones, but really I conceived it initially to be a side project that I would only do when MTX was off the road. And that's kind of one of the stories behind the name. Like I called it the Plus Ones specifically because, to sort of take the piss a little bit and be like, this band is an afterthought. And but it just sort of took on a life of its own. I just wanted an outlet for my own songwriting because there was no room in the Mr. T experience for anyone other than Dr. Frank to contribute material. He was so prolific at that time, and he's such an accomplished lyricist that for someone who was just getting his feet wet and trying to learn the craft of songwriting, I feel like it would have been like, if I was the apprentice for a master woodworker and he's doing these incredibly ornate credenzas and dining sets, and I would come to him and be like, I just made my first stool. Can I put it on display with the rest of, it just would have, I would have been too self-conscious to even suggest it. So I needed something to be an outlet for that. And then I started to become more and more interested in having a band of my own where I could step to the forefront. And that eventually did kind of lead to a breaking point where there wasn't enough time to do both.
It's interesting what you said about, you're in this band, especially how young you were. I'm sure you were intimidated a little bit to even want to bring a song idea in, and you knew in the back of your head you really didn't need to. There was a glut of material. Frank was the main writer, but you have this itch. I've met tons of guys out there that wanted to get out of their bands, and some can't get out of their bands. Some of their bands are too big. I won't mention any names, Foo Fighters, but they're in this band, and they got a central guy that's writing everything. No effects. Fat Mike's another one. He wrote every note. So if you want to write outside of it, you got to start your own project. But one more thing before we get into the song, okay? About 2 years to the date of you guys releasing the album It's a Calling, which came out March 19th, 2002. On March 24th, 2004, the song All the Boys was featured on the TV show The OC on the 22nd episode of the first season. Adam Brody and Misha Barton famously starred in the show, but this episode also featured Paris Hilton and Colin Hanks. The song actually is more than just background music. It's actually part of the plot, and I'll let you take it from there, and then we'll break down the tune.
Yeah, well, like you said, the album came out on Asian Man Records, and I got a call from Mike Park, head honcho at Asian Man, one day saying, I have what I think is really good news. The music director of the OC reached out to me asking if they could use your song on the soundtrack for one of their episodes. And I just said yes, and I didn't negotiate with them because I didn't even want to let them off the phone. So we got paid, I think, $5,000 for the placement of the song. I can get into the story later on about why that number was crucial for him, because we ended up in the hole a little bit with the mastering expenses of the album, and I think he just really needed to offset that. And so I was really thrilled because the show was at its commercial peak at that point, and also it was at this point breaking huge indie artists like Death Cab for Cutie and Not a Surf and Phantom Planet, of course, and Rooney. Like all these bands were taking off, but we had no idea that the song would actually be incorporated into the plot of the episode in a pretty unflattering light, which if we had known, we might have been able to squeeze a few extra $1,000s out of him just for the indignity of it. But it was a thrill, like to hear the song on TV. We all gathered together and watched the episode, and I can't be upset about it because to this day, this is by far the most lucrative placement that we've ever had. It continues every quarter when I get my BMI royalties. The fact that our song was on the OC, pays for a very nice dinner for my wife and myself. I don't know if you have any stories about the most significant placements for any Less Than Jake songs, but you can probably point to the ones that had the most benefits, whether it was the trajectory of the band or to your bottom line. But this one is by far and away at the top of the list for anything I've ever been a part of.
Well, I also know, Joel, how hard it was to get placement on those shows. You needed backing, you needed money, you needed an in, and here you were on Asian Man. I know there wasn't a budget. Heck, Mike's trying to cover the mastering costs in the final hour, going, maybe we could make this all work out financially. But and again, going back to what we talked about at the top, you never know in this business. You never know. Hate calling it a business, but you never know. When you write a song and you throw it out there, what's going to happen to it. And I absolutely love that happened to you, and how exciting. I know that feeling of sitting around. I remember when Less Than Jake was first on MTV, 120 minutes with the whole band's there. It was like you never forget that, and this sounds like it was really special for you guys too. I want to get into the track. You kept it punk rock, Joel. I can't argue with that. It's 1 minute and 50 seconds. You're under the 2 minute mark, so you already got Johnny Rotten's approval. No intro. The intro is the intro verse, I'm calling it. I'm not going to call this the first verse. It's the intro verse.
You say it's your first time backstage at the Troubadour, at the Troubadour, at the Troubadour. But I get the feeling that's been said by you before, I'll admit I'm flattered that you're...
You say it's your first time backstage at the Troubadour, at the Troubadour, at the Troubadour. But I get the feeling that's been said by you before. By you before? By you before.
Okay, so we should probably give your listeners a little bit of insight into this. Have you, Chris, ever performed at the Troubadour in Hollywood before?
I have at the Troubadour, and I was confused. I thought it was Mr. T Experience, but we played with you and MXPX at the Roxy, I believe. Do you recall that show in 97?
Of course, that was... such a fun time. Yeah, the Roxy is on the Sunset Strip proper. The Troubadour is in West Hollywood, and it is a venue that has been around since the 50s and is famously the home base for a lot of those Laurel Canyon, Los Angeles luminaries like Joni Mitchell and James Taylor. And it was where Elton John got his U.S. breakthrough, was playing the stage there. The Eagles got their start there. And a lot of those hair metal bands from the 80s, Guns N' Roses. Like, if you can think of a famous Los Angeles musical artist or group, they were on stage at the Troubadour at some point. But it also was, they hosted many punk rock and pop punk shows in the 90s. I've had the privilege of playing there maybe a dozen times in my various bands. But the Mr. T Experience, that was our spot where when we would come to Southern California, the Troubadour was where we would play. And so I had been there many times, and I got the idea for this song, which I think I should stress up front is not strictly autobiographical, but I am a guy in a band, and I played the Troubadour, and I was very familiar with it. So I was backstage at Mr. T Experience show, and Ronnie Barnett, the bass player of the Muffs, was back there, and we were just kind of shooting the breeze and hanging out on this lime green sofa that they would have in the very narrow hallway at the Troubadour. You would walk up a steep flight of stairs, and there was almost a catwalk. The sofa was underneath a bay window that overlooked the audience. You could see the stage from there, and also the mixing desk was up there, and it kind of led to, a bathroom, and we were all got to speculating of all those bands, those famous artists that had performed there, what kind of shenanigans they must have gotten up to. Like, we were sitting down on that couch. We're like, should we even be sitting on this? Who knows what has happened on this thing? And you sort of like, if these walls could talk. So it kind of created a scenario in my mind. And it was an invention, but I was imagining what would happen if we were back here and we were one of those kind of bands where there were groupies who were trying to sneak backstage and chat them up. Like, what would that look like? What would that sound like? And I was just trying to paint a picture.
Yeah, the 80s guys, the metal guys, they used to write about their experiences, and you're writing about hoping to have the experience.
Yeah, I guess I should stress that as we get deeper into the song, you will see that I'm inventing a character of, presumably a young woman who has managed to sneak her way backstage. And this was not an actual issue for any band that I've ever been. We were not besieged by armies of loose women who were looking to seduce and take advantage of us. And I think if we had been, I can safely say some of my bandmates would have been perfectly okay with that scenario. But it was sort of a fantasy about what you might say to one of those people.
No, it's inspiration. You never know where we're going to get it from. And sometimes writing about something that seems ridiculous or unattainable ends up turning into something great. I found what I call the heartbeat, the theme of this song very early on. And it's these junts, the full band stereo hits. So this intro verse, it's a lone guitar and a singular vocal here. But on the line, you say it's your first time backstage at the Troubadour, dun, dun. And then we get a couple more of those throughout the verse. And you'll see that happening later in the song when we get to it. And I love that part because it reminds me that you can keep things simple and have them be effective. The longer I get in this journey of songwriting, I'm always trying to out-clever myself. And sometimes clever's crap. Sometimes clever, who cares? Go to the chord that feels right. And these are simple hits with the whole band, but they're so cool here. Right after this happens, we get this junt from the whole band, and then we're into what I'm calling verse 1.
I'll admit I'm flattered that you're always at the shows, always at the shows, always at the shows. And I wish that mattered, but then that's just how it goes. That's how it goes, how it goes.
I'll admit I'm flattered that you're always at the shows, always at the shows, always at the shows. And I wish that mattered, but then that's just how it goes. That's how it goes, how it goes. And I want to ask you before we talk about this, the playfulness of this is the repeating of shows 3 times, the repeating of goes. In the intro verse, it was Troubadour 3 times, and sometimes songs have that. Certainly you could have written other lyrics here, but it sounds like you kind of hung on that simplicity, which again, songs can be simple. Many punk rock songs are, and they can be great.
Yeah, it doesn't get much more simple than the structure of the song, to be honest. And maybe you're right. There's maybe a reason why this song resonated with anyone is because it's sort of primal. It is literally 3 chords. You can tell it's the efforts of someone who is just learning the process of how to even write a song, create something out of whole cloth. And it is like a Ramones song or a Buddy Holly song. It is nothing more than what absolutely the minimum was what is needed, both in the instrumentation and melodically. I think that my very earliest attempts to write songs, my primary and maybe even almost my only concern was just how catchy I could make it. Later on, I would realize that I did want to have something to say, and I would write from more of a personal perspective. I wasn't hiding behind creating a character or inventing a scenario. I figured if I'm going to do this, I might as well decide whether or not I have something to say. But back then, I was like, I just want someone to come away with not being able to get this song out of their head. If you hear it once, I want you to be humming it all day long. And a big part of that is the meter and the rhyme scheme, which is something I learned from Dr. Frank. He was the master at internal rhymes, and it became almost dogmatic for me, is that you can never cheat a rhyme. You'll never catch me doing a near rhyme or a slant rhyme, or kind of manipulating the pronunciation of something to fit the meter or to make it closer to rhyme. So I think part of what makes this melody so sing-songy and catchy is that there's a feminine rhyme there, which is troubadour and you before. So it's not just the last syllable that rhymes, but it's it's both the middle part of the word and the end of the sentence.
No, that's awesome. And, you had cited some examples of some pieces you played as a kid that made it into this song. And you even said, this was kind of, the template for this song was Cool Kids by Screeching Weasel. Great song. But, really looking at the lyrics and the way you're explaining them, and I'm looking at them on paper, it's got a nursery rhyme quality to it. And nursery rhymes are the catchiest things. We heard them when we were kids. We'll never forget them. Okay, half of them are the same song. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, Mary had a little lamb. But, repeating all this is great. I think it's, to your point, sometimes just the most primal thing that comes out is the most catchy thing. And in verse 1, it sounds like the lead vocal is doubled here. Do you recall if the lead vocal got doubled here? It doesn't sound like it's doubled in the verse.
I'm almost positive that is correct. That was a big thing that Robert Shimp, our engineer, he was my roommate at the time. We met because he was an intern at Toast Studios where we recorded, and he was the assistant engineer on the Mr. T Experience album, Revenge is Sweet and So Are You, which was the album I think we were touring behind when we played shows with Less Than Jake. And from there, we were in close quarters for the better part of a month working on that record together, and we really hit it off. He ended up going on the road later on with MTX and becoming our front of house engineer. Then he and I moved in together into a house in El Cerrito, which is a working class suburb of Berkeley, and our roommates we had half the Donnas living in this rock and roll house with us, and he just became our go-to guy, where he recorded everything that we ever did as the band. And he was big on doubling vocals. He would say, something that John Lennon always did too. You have to remember also, this is pre-auto-tune. So one of the ways that you could kind of make your voice, it was easier to remain on pitch if you had two voices taking up the sonic bandwidth. It forgave a lot of sins.
Yeah, for sure. Well, lead vocal is definitely doubled here, confirmed by Joel, as well as drums, bass, and stereo guitars. They're all in here in verse 1. Stereo guitars are pan left and right and are playful. They're not the same, okay? They're not exactly stereo images. There's a little bit of playfulness, a little noodling going on in the right side, and that keeps it real. I really love that. We're into chorus 1 now.
You're very slick, but you're not being coy. I'm on to your tricks, and I'm wise to your ploys. And I bet you say that to all the boys, all the boys.
You're very slick when you're not being coy, but I'm on to your tricks, and I'm wise to your ploys. And I bet you say that to all the boys, to all the boys, to all the boys.
So yeah, again, I'm sort of playing a character in the song. This is something that is extremely tricky to pull off as a songwriter, to the point where I almost never attempt to do it anymore, because the audience just does not understand. If you are the lead singer, they assume that every word that's coming out of your mouth is strictly autobiographical and also represents your own innermost feelings. And so if you're trying to either create a character or kind of be an unreliable narrator, that is very hard to translate to the listener, especially in a punk rock song that's under 2 minutes. Like, it's just a lot to ask of them. So not only am I creating this fictitious scenario where I'm in a band, or, you know, whoever you're listening to sing the song is in a band that's popular enough that, you know, groupies are sneaking backstage. But then I'm also saying I'm the kind of person, the singer in a band, who's cool enough that I don't even care that this girl is trying to seduce me. You know, I'm above it all. But I also think you're not supposed to really be convinced that that's the way the singer feels. Are you a Warren Zevon guy at all, Chris?
I am.
I always kind of imagined this to kind of be like our version of Poor, Poor, Pitiful Me.
Poor, poor, pitiful me. Poor, poor, pitiful me. These young girls won't let me be. Lord have mercy on me. Woe is me.
He's singing in that song about how he's beset by, you know, all these women who won't stop taking advantage of him because he's just irresistible to the opposite sex. And I don't think you're supposed to believe that that is literally what is happening. You're supposed to be like, I don't think this guy's on the up and up. And that's part of the humor behind it. So I came of age in the 90s where so many aspects of popular culture are just steeped in irony and postmodernism. So I can't help it. I love all that kind of stuff. And I think there's something very postmodern about being a band and writing a song about being in a band and using specific examples, like here's a real club in Hollywood that I'm talking about, but you're sort of blending my real world experiences with, you know, a little bit of high fantasy. So yeah, this guy, whether or not we can believe him, whether he can be trusted, he's not going to be taken advantage of by this by this Jezebel who's found her way somehow into the green room at the Troubadour.
How will I know if he really loves me? I say a prayer with every...
Hey everybody, don't go anywhere. We got lots more with Joel Reeder coming right up after a few words from our sponsors.
Looking to elevate your music career? DistroKid is a digital music distribution service that enables musicians to distribute their music to online stores and streaming platforms such as Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube Music, Amazon, Tidal, and many more. DistroKid collects earnings and payments, sending them to you, the artist. With DistroKid, artists unlock a world of possibilities. From easily paying collaborators with splits to securing your music with DistroLock, DistroKid covers all bases. Plus, you can promote your releases with Hyperfollow and create eye-catching visuals with a Spotify Canvas generator, all for free. But that's not all. Introducing the DistroKid app, now available on iOS and Android. Artists can manage their releases, view streaming stats, and withdraw earnings, all from the palm of their hand. And for those looking to perfect their sound, check out Mixia. With its simple interface and customizable mastering options, artists can make their music sound polished and professional within minutes. And don't forget about Instant Share, DistroKid's newest feature. Share large files securely with collaborators, producers, and more, ensuring your music streams at the highest quality. Ready to take your music to the next level? Download the DistroKid app and explore their suite of tools today. Plus, listeners can enjoy 30% off their first year by visiting distrokid.com/VIP/DeMakes. That's distrokid.com/VIP/DeMakes.
I get so many headaches every month.
It could be chronic migraine, 15 or more headache days a month, each lasting 4 hours or more.
Botox, onabotulinum toxin A, prevents headaches in adults with chronic migraine. It's not for those who have 14 or fewer headache days a month. Prescription Botox is injected by your doctor. Effects of Botox may spread hours to weeks after injection, causing serious symptoms. Alert your doctor right away, as difficulty swallowing, speaking, breathing, eye problems, or muscle weakness can be signs of a life-threatening condition. Patients with these conditions before injection are at highest risk. Side effects may include allergic reactions, neck and injection site pain, fatigue, and headache. Allergic reactions can include rash, welts, asthma symptoms, and dizziness. Don't receive Botox if there's a skin infection. Tell your doctor your medical history, muscle or nerve conditions, including ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, myasthenia gravis, or Lambert-Eaton syndrome, and medications, including botulinum toxins, as these may increase the risk of serious side effects.
Why wait? Ask your doctor. Visit BotoxChronicMigraine.com or call 1-800-44-BOTOX to learn more.
Hey, it's Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. Now, I was looking for fun ways to tell you that Mint's offer of unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month is back. So I thought it would be fun if we made $15 bills. But it turns out that's very illegal. So there goes my big idea for the commercial. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3 months, $90 for 6 months, or $180 for 12-month plan required. $15 per month equivalent. Taxes and fees extra. Initial plan term only. Greater than 50 gigabytes may slow when network is busy. See terms.
This summer at Wolf Trap, Sting, Trombone Shorty, Lauren Daigle, Harry Connick Jr., Young the Giant, A.R. Rahman, Sarah McLachlan, and many more. Tickets on sale now at wolftrap.org.
The most memorable gifts aren't found, they're made. Zazzle is a custom marketplace where you pick any product, a mug, a card, a tote, a phone case, and make it personal. A photo, a name, an inside joke. The kind of gift that actually fits the person. That's what 30 million customers have been coming back to Zazzle for over 20 years to find. Right now, save 25% on your first order at Zazzle.com. That's Zazzle.com. Make it zamazing.
Have you ever wondered why songs on the radio are popular? Why do certain movies get made, even though the premise seems completely random? Why are concert tickets costing you $3,000, but nobody makes any money touring? Well, on my podcast, Breaking Down the Biz, we answer all those questions and more. I'm Seth Schackner. I have over 2 decades of experience in the entertainment and the music industry, and every week I talk to insiders that lend insight and expertise on the media you know and love, past, present, and future. Subscribe now on your favorite podcasting platform or watch us on YouTube so you never miss a beat. Let's make sense of this industry together.
Hey friends, Chris DeMakes here. If you love Chris DeMakes a podcast and you'd like to help us continue bringing you great episodes each week, please take a minute to check out ChrisDeMakes.com. That's where you'll find our Patreon. Our Patreon supporters get instant access to hundreds of episodes of The After Party, our weekly bonus episode that people have raved to us about for years. You can also get ad-free, early releases of each week's episode of Chris DeMakes a podcast, as well as unedited video versions of the show. Even if you're not sure if you want to sign up, you can go to ChrisDeMakes.com and sign up for a free account. We'll throw you a free preview episode here and there. We can't thank you enough for all the support. And if you have a few extra bucks and you want to help us keep the lights on, our Patreon is the way to do it. Head to ChrisDeMakes.com to learn more.
Wish I had you near me now. Said there's no mistake.
And now, back to the show.
Well, chorus 1, some cool stuff going on here. The first 2 lines, you're very slick when you're not being coy, but I'm onto your tricks and I'm wise to your ploys. We get the first harmonies in the song, and we get a nice, loud harmony, predominantly panned off left on the last All the Boys here in chorus 1. Drums, bass, and stereo guitars are still rocking away. The drums are on the ride for the first half of this chorus. On the second half, the drums go to a closed hi-hat, and the stereo guitars go to palm mutes there. I feel like the second half, it goes to the verse almost, the second half. You tuck back down, so when the verse comes, I don't know, it feels like you've been there for a second. It's a really cool change. Talk about that a little bit. Was that drum feel ever discussed? It's odd in a chorus that you'd have the second half tucked down.
It is, yes, which is kind of funny because, like I said, this was one of the first songs I ever wrote, but I was already breaking the format a little bit from what you would expect. A chorus is supposed to just get bigger and bigger and open up, and it does for the first part of it, and then it kind of sucks back down dynamically and gets tight for, I guess, what you consider sort of the punchline, right? the hammer of it. But it was completely by design. I wanted that part to... It's a way of surprising the listener and kind of bringing it back down so that line lands even harder, so you can't miss it. And I guess now's a good time to make sure I point out that between when the band formed in 98 and this first album came out, we had released an EP with the original 3-piece lineup, but already the band had gone through many changes and turmoils, and we'd already lost an original member. So Dan Panic had left after our first 5-song EP was released and before we recorded this full length. So the drummer on this track is actually Luis Iades, who's continues to be my bandmate to this day. He's the drummer in Pansy Division, which is how I met him, and he and I play together as the rhythm section in the Avengers. So he's on the drums on the song, and we had added a second guitar player, John Speranza, and that's part of what you talked about, that playfulness between the two guitars, how they're not perfectly locked in, and that's because there are two distinct players who had very different styles and very different sounds. That's why it's not just all locked in, chugging palm muting. One guitar is a little more open and the other one is a little tighter. And I think when it works, it really works.
Okay, that makes sense now. And there are bands that have one guitar player that will consciously be I'm going to make this side more playful, okay? But it makes sense that there's two different guys doing that here. Verse 2, the drums, bass, and stereo guitars continue rocking away, but the stereo guitars are a little bit more wide open than verse 1.
You're quite good at telling me just what I want to hear, what I want to hear, what I want to hear. And you do a bit more than just talk, that much is clear, that much is clear, much is clear.
You're quite good at telling me just what I want to hear, what I want to hear, what I want to hear. And you do a bit more than just talk. That much is clear. That much is clear. That much is clear. What is she doing more than talking, Joel?
Okay. So in my own mild-mannered way, that was my attempt to be a little bit salacious. And that's probably, as suggestive as you're ever going to catch me getting in the lyrics to one of my songs. But I'm trying to paint a picture about who this person is. I think she is someone who knows the game, knows what she's doing. I have a lot of respect for that. But I think she knows what she wants, and she's not afraid to go for it. And she probably has been successful more often than she's failed, which is part of why you're supposed to, think the narrator is a really cool guy. I am trying to have it both ways a little bit. I'm both trying to be it's not really me. However, I'm singing it, so I'm trying to come across as someone who's, too cool to be fooled by this and to be taken advantage of. But I also want to kind of create the sense that, something a little untoward is happening here. It's a little bit rock and roll and a little bit dangerous. And that's, what I imagined probably a scenario that played out many times in that backstage area of upstairs at the Troubadour.
You don't know how many times I've walked into legendary venues and sat there and just thought to myself, Joel, if these walls could talk. Because I know the legends that were in there. I know the parties that were in there. And I've read the rock biographies and the stories and seen the biopics. So I'll sit there and marvel sometimes and just, I know that feeling that you're speaking of. Chorus 2 is right on the heels of verse 2. It's the same overall instrumentation, lyrical placement, and harmonies as chorus 1. But at the very end, we get a spirited ow, a rock and roll ow that takes us into an 8-bar guitar solo, which is the chorus progression. That continues on with the solo. With drums, bass, stereo guitars, we get a nice loud tambourine that comes in. I love that. It's the only spot in the song the tambo comes in. And a very pronounced lead guitar.
You're very slick when you're not being good, but I'm on to your tricks and I was to your ploys. And I bet you say that to all the boys, to all the boys, all the boys.
like this 50s, 60s classic rock lead. It's just, it feels right for this song. Talk to me about that. Is he the kind of player that goes in there and just knocks out a solo, or do you remember comping this like he did 3 or 4 and you took the best parts?
We did not have to comp that solo. Scotty was and is almost an irritatingly accomplished musician. And he was one of those guys who it seemed to come very naturally to, like, just as a quick example, during the time that I knew him when we were a band together, he sort of almost lost interest in the standard 6-string guitar. And one day he said he bought used off of Craigslist a pedal steel. He's like, I'm going to learn how to play this. And I was there when he picked it up for the first time, and it sounded just awful. It's a really complicated instrument. And then a week later, I went over to his house and he busted out again, and he sounded incredible. He was just one of those people who could pick almost anything up and just master it. Like, you know, he would just, I'm sure he spent 12 hours a day just smoking pot and doing nothing but playing the pedal steel. And then, like, he to this day, that he lives in the Pacific Northwest now, and he plays in sort of like classic country pickup bands. He's became almost exclusively a pedal steel player, but he was always a ripper. So this solo was composed and locked from almost the earliest versions of it. Like if you listen to the demo version, it's note for note the same guitar solo, which reminds me almost something like Elliot Easton from the Cars would play, you know? Mm-hmm. Like it's just so fluid, but it totally rips. And I'm glad you mentioned the little exclamation right before the guitar solo. That's something I'm a sucker for. Like I love when like AC/DC does it, and like stick that in your fuse backs. Or anytime a lead singer says guitar,
yeah,
before the guitar player starts soloing, like I don't know, I love it. And I think the platonic ideal of that is if you can get that exclamation, it's like a cry of exuberance. It really ramps up the energy of the song. If you can capture that live in the room mics, you know, so it's part of the bedrock of the track and not an overdub, that is really what, you know, is the lifeblood of the song. Of course, if you do a bad scream, it ruins the take, but sometimes those are the risks that you have to take. So to me, and that's not something that was on the demo version, like that is just like, I'm feeling it, and we're about to kick this song up a level or two. And the tambourine, I think, is a crucial addition at this point. Something else that kind of breaks the form a little bit, because you expect to have a tambourine usually on the chorus to fill out a little more of the sonic landscape. But the chorus to this song, like you said, like we discussed, kind of comes back down at the end of it, and a tambourine wouldn't work over that. So it's pretty rare to have the tambourine only over the solo, but that's sort of like the most raucous part of the whole track. And I'm reminded of a quote that I think I can attribute to Jim Atkins of Jimmy Eat World, which I remember reading him say in some interview, like, hey, bands that don't overdub a tambourine playing 16th notes on your songs, why don't you want your audience to feel joy? Because the tambourine's one of the most joyful instruments to me.
Absolutely. And you took the words out of my mouth when you said, you know, we couldn't really put it in the chorus because the chorus goes to that, you know, close hi-hat for the second half. It wouldn't work there. It really wouldn't. So if you're going to bring the tambo in, the perfect time was that guitar solo. Right out of that guitar solo, we get into chorus 3. If it's not broke, don't fix it. We got the same harmony placement and the same lyrics. And then we get into the very end of the song, we get the refrain one more time. I'm calling this the tag refrain. The band stops, and it's just a vocal. And I bet you say that, and we get the jung jung with the band again, that theme. To all the boys, jung jung. To all the boys, and then just by itself with a nice harmony on it, harmony stack, all the boys.
You're very slick when you're not really good, and I'm on to your tricks, and I'm wise to your chords, and I bet you say that to all the boys, to all the boys, all the boys, and I bet you say that to all the boys, to all the boys, all the boys.
You obviously didn't overthink this song. it was one of your first attempts at songwriting. You threw it out there. Do you think today, Joel, if you were to write this song, that you would have been like, yeah, it needs a little more lyrical content. We can't repeat how it goes 3 times. I know I'm guilty of that. Or do you think you'd still be able to crank this out and have it be a facsimile of this?
I'm not sure. I think even if I attempted to, it would probably come across as contrived. It really is primordial, and I think it comes across as the product of someone who's not overthinking things, because I was barely capable of thinking, much less overthinking about what I was doing. And I'm not sure you can fake that effectively, although some of my favorite music in the world is incredibly dumb music made by incredibly smart people. And I think that intelligence shines through even when it is just bone simple. But it just works because it is nothing more or less than it needs to be. If I could go back, I wouldn't change the lyrical structure. I wouldn't add anything. The 3-part harmony at the end of the song was always by design. That was intended to be a big live moment. That 3-part stacked harmony. Always knew that wanted the song to end and have that be soloed. And all 3 of us sang in the band right from the outset. It was we're a 3-piece. Everyone had a microphone, and the nights where we really nailed that last harmony, it was pretty magical. I'm sure there were plenty of nights where we didn't nail it and it was a little bit sour, but if you could it would just resonate. I always pictured that as like the most grandiose version of that. It's like something Queen would do, just like we're dropping everything out and just the sound of those 3 voices together harmonizing. And I think when it worked, it really worked. I think it came pretty close on the recording to capturing how it was in my head when I conceived it.
I think so too. I think it's the perfect exclamation point to a really cool punk rock song. And before we break, a couple things. It's great to see your face. I said that earlier. I can't wait to see you again in person. I'm really, really glad that you were able to take some time to sit in here with us today. And before we break, you're playing currently with a band called Fatal Flaw. You guys have been releasing a series of singles over the past few years. Tell me about that or anything else you got going on.
Yeah, the Fatal Flaw is my current band where I am the lead singer and the primary songwriter. I moved from the Bay Area to the Boston area almost 20 years ago now. It's been 18 years, I think, and formed this band out here. Another long-running group that's been the outlet for my current songwriting, which I've sort of evolved from like when I wrote this song that we're discussing today, All the Boys. It's just a straight up pop punk song like I would have done in any of my bands at the time. And then a little later on, I kind of intentionally tried to steer away from that and just go to more of a pure bubblegum power pop mode to kind of, distance myself from what I'd done in the past. And then somewhere along the way, I discovered bands like Super Drag and Jimmy Eat World, and those were hugely influential on me. And now I almost come around completely to the point where I'm not afraid to write a punk rock song anymore. It's just whatever comes out of me. I've learned that it's an indelible part of my musical DNA is that I came up playing in punk rock bands, and I can't escape it, and I no longer want to try. So the Fatal Flaw is catchy melody forward power pop, but also loud guitars and energy. And I'm as proud of what we're putting out now as anything I've ever done. Like we had a reboot a couple of years ago where I overhauled most of the lineup here, and everything is coming out kind of the way that I've always wanted to for almost the first time, where it's like we're accomplishing exactly the sound that I hear in my head and bring it out into the real world. Very excited for people to hear what we've been working on.
Awesome, man. Well, I'm excited to hear it. I'm going to check out some more The Fatal Flaw. And next time I get up to New England area, Boston area, I'm going to hit you up.
I want to hang out so badly. We have so much to catch up on. I haven't even told you the story behind the mastering fiasco of this album.
Was it mastered, just because I know the time period, was it mastered by Andy Ernst?
Andy Ernst I never worked with him. The mastering engineer that we always did the Mr. T Experience stuff, his name was John Golden.
At K Mastering.
Yes. John Golden and his son JJ, it was a family business. I can't recall in any of your interviews ever the subject of mastering even coming up, but if your audience doesn't know, like, the mastering engineer kind of does the final touches of the song. Once it's recorded and all mixed, the final person who touches it is the mastering engineer, and they EQ things and they compress it, and so there's no volume variation. And if they hear like, oh, it needs a little more high end here, or it needs some of the mids rolled out, they do that. It's the last chance for any sonic changes to happen before it goes to press. And I got obsessed with a story that I'd read where Dr. Dre was apparently super unhappy with the NWA album Straight Outta Compton because he thought it didn't have any low end. And then he sent it off to be mastered by someone named Bernie Grundman. And he sent it back, and all of a sudden, miraculously, the low end was there. So Dr. Dre gave him the nickname Big Bass. And this guy's he's a legendary mastering engineer, and he had just mastered the Blink-182 album Enema of the State, which, I thought sounded incredible. And I kind of became obsessed, like, oh, my bass is not prominent enough on this album, so we're going to send it to the same mastering engineer who did NWA, and all of a sudden it's going to bring out all the low end that I'm not hearing. So we sent it off to him, and I made the crucial mistake of not checking to see how much he charged. Because this is a guy who works on major label records, and we're used to, our usual indie rock guys. And he sent the project back, and it didn't really solve all the issues that I was hearing. This was the height of the loudness wars, which is when, starting in the late 90s and into the 2000s, what was in fashion was just compressing the hell out of the track to make it as loud as possible, but it kind of squashes all the dynamics. So you don't get the super highs and you don't get the super lows, but it just is like really crunchy. It's actually, personally, I don't mind it as much as some people do, because I kind of like how crunchy it sounds. But so it was loud, but much like the phone call I got from Mike Park, saying like, "Hey, your song's going to be on the OC," and I didn't negotiate with him. I got a very different phone call from him. It was like, "Hey, I just got the bill from the mastering engineer, and I have never paid this much for mastering in my life."
Wow.
It was equal to the budget of the entire album.
Yes.
Yeah, well, we paid for the recording ourselves. I didn't get a chance to get into this, but so we recorded it at the Toast Studios, like you said, which was a really well-known studio in the Bay Area, where Third Eye Blind, it was their home studio, and Neil Young had recorded there just before our session, actually. So he'd left behind this bundle of sage and so we lit that up and saged the whole studio to kind of cleanse the Neil Young vibes from the live room. And REM had recorded there, so it was a very famous studio, and we were getting a discount rate through Robert Shimp because he had been the assistant engineer there. So they gave him the friends and family discount. But even there, it was a $1,700 a day studio, which is about $3,000 a day in 2026 money. So as you can imagine, that adds up fast. If you're a major label band recording it for a month, that's $90,000 just on the studio time alone. And this was an all analog studio, so all the boys is recorded to tape. There was not a computer in sight in this studio. So I know sometimes you discuss this with your guests, but the track that we're listening to doesn't have we didn't record it to a click. There was no editing digitally. There was no tuning. And in fact, at one point we'd recorded all day, and it was midnight, and Robert got this idea that he thought we'd have better energy if we just set up all together in the live room and ran through every song that we had for the album as one continuous set from beginning to end, just transitioning one song right into another. So I think most of the takes on the album are from that little like mini live set that we played on the floor together in the room, including all the boys. So all we could afford was 3 days of the studio, even at the discount. And there wasn't even time to drive back across the Bay Bridge to the East Bay side and sleep. I just curled up on the couch in the control room for a couple hours after we'd finished tracking, and then just immediately went into doing all my vocals in one day. So at the end of the session, like, my voice was in tatters. And we had probably $3,000, and that included having to buy the 2-inch tape, which was not cheap. You know, you have to go to Leo's Pro Audio right off of Telegraph Avenue and drop down $300 per reel for, you know, the 2-inch tape. And the digital revolution, more than anything else, what it buys bands is the time to really spend on making sure that you're not just up against the clock the entire time. But we've knocked it out in 3 days for $3,000, and then the bill comes from Bernie Big Bass Grunman to Asian Man, and it's for $3,000. So Mike, I said, like, I don't know what to do. And it's like, I've just begged him, just please pay it. Like, I don't know, at this point, what are we supposed to do? So that was, I think, my big regret, because I felt terrible for doing that to Mike. And the fact that the song got placed on a TV show that brought us back out of the red was a small miracle. So of all the many things I can be grateful for the OC, that's one of them. So even though they used the track on the show as an example of so Colin Hanks, son of Tom Hanks, is playing a character who's is a pretentious LA actor who has his own vanity project as a band, and they needed a song to represent, you know, this douchebag. And I don't know if the music supervisor of the OC heard our song and just thought, like, oh, it mentions the Troubadour, so that's a local landmark, and that's all it took, or if she really heard it and said, like, you know, this guy sure thinks a lot of himself. You know, again, not realizing that I was not singing from my own firsthand experience. But whatever the case, I'm just thankful that she picked us off the pile and put us on the small screen. Because it really was that moment, like, you know, you hear about bands gathering around the radio to hear their song for the first time being played on the top 40. That was our version. That was the mid-2000s equivalent, was hearing your song on a show like the OC. It was pretty cool, and you don't get many moments like that in your so-called showbiz career. So I'm grateful for it, and now I get to talk to you about it, which, like, you know, you're one of my favorite dudes in all of punk rock. It's great that this has reconnected us.
Thank you for the kind words and for setting all that up. And like I said, we write these songs, we send them out there, and you never know. And you had some heartache surrounding this. You know, $6,000 to make a punk rock record 25 years ago. That's an astronomical figure. Okay, it's still, heck, that's a lot of money today, because recording has actually gotten cheaper, as we know. So I think that's super cool. And again, thanks for sitting in and taking the time.
You bet, man. You want to know how we got that $3,000 in the first place to even pay for the recording ourselves?
Who got that?
I've heard you talk about this guy on your show before. David Foster, the super producer of Chicago.
Yeah.
Right? David Foster, sometime in the late 90s, decided the next move in his career was he was going to form a Christian boy band and produce them to huge success. And they named the band Plus One, which I think was some sort of Christian allegory. I think the plus one might have been Jesus Christ. But we found out that they got signed to Atlantic Records, and we got word of this, and we already existed and already had a release out. So we hired a intellectual property lawyer who's, you know, willing to work on commission, and sent a cease and desist letter to Atlantic Records, and they settled with us
for $3,000
out of court for, I think, well, I think it was for maybe $20,000, half of which went to the lawyer, and half of which went to us. We bought our first tour van with $5,000 of that, and the rest went towards making our album. But I hadn't budgeted mastering, unfortunately, out of that.
Yeah, you would have asked for more.
That once-in-a-lifetime windfall. But I can't hear David Foster's name without
thinking of that.
Thanks for the 20 grand, David Foster. Appreciate it.
Hey everybody, the song you're hearing right now is the new single from The Fatal Flaw called Navy Dodge Ram. So make sure you check that out and check out all the music of The Fatal Flaw. They are awesome, and Joel is an amazing guest. And don't go anywhere. We got lots more Chris DeMakes a Podcast coming right up after a few words from our sponsors.
Job site. Moved. Your crew needs 4 more rooms. Tomorrow. If you booked on your own, you could be left high and dry. But you booked with Engine. Found the right hotel with one click and avoided cancellation fees. Because Engine lets you do that, too. Yes change, no charge. Engine. Free to join. Flexible when plans change. Teams, travel, spend. Managed. Head to engine.com/flex to get started.
The internet gives us a glimpse into the crazy happening all around us. Unhinged behavior, personal secrets, unbelievable coincidences. It's all one big circus, and the RR Show is your front row seat. Each week, we curate the wildest Reddit stories just for you. Whether you're into hilarious accidents, insane relationship drama, or pure chaos, these insane confessions are sure to make your jaw drop. Listen to the RR Show weekly on Mondays via your favorite podcast platform. Or get your episodes early and ad-free by becoming a member. The RR Show. All of the drama, none of the hassle.
Do you like music, learning about good music, and laughing at bad music? Well, I have the show for you. I'm Chris DeMakes a Podcast producer, Chris Fafalius, and my One Hit Thunder co-host Matt Kelly and I are 300-plus episodes deep into revisiting one-hit wonders to decide if they deserve a second listen or should stay safely buried in your memory. We give every artist a fair shot, roast them when necessary, and when a band or artist is actually really good, we officially certify them Thunder, and maybe someday we'll even get around to sending out those notarized certificates. Basically, it's an incredibly fun music podcast, so smash that subscribe button on One Hit Thunder wherever you get your pods.
As we near the end of the show, here's a band you might not know.
Welcome to this week's Band You Might Not Know. If you'd like your band to be considered for Chris DeMakes a Podcast, email your best song via MP3 only and a short bio to bandyoumightnotknow@gmail.com. This week's featured artist is War Grime, a genre-defying 3-piece from Colorado Springs, Colorado, blending the awareness of punk and the aggression of hardcore with a touch of metal. These 3 18-year-olds have a debut album out now called Sides. Here's a snippet of their song, Fented.
This milk is drunk, leaving 14-year-olds dead. This pile of garbage that I call my bed, wasting away as a motherfucking fathead.
The Wrap with Chris and Chris.
I've been wanting to get Joel on the show for a long time now, Chris, and because I just feel like he has so much to say, he's very musically knowledgeable, and I got to start with this. I love his story about joining the Mr. T Experience. He just went up and shot his shot as a teenager, and next thing you know, he's in the band.
Yeah, and I remember him being young, like I said to him, but I don't recall it being weird. Like, I'm sure you've seen Greg Ginn out now with Black Flag. He's got like a bunch of early kids in their early 20s playing with him, and it looks odd, okay? I'm not going to say it's weird. It looks odd. Yeah. It didn't look odd back then. Maybe if I were to go back there now as a guy my age now, it might stick out a little bit more. But yeah, he fit right in.
Yeah, it's really interesting that this song is based on a piece of like classical music that he learned as a kid. It's just a really cool story. I don't think we've heard this story before.
No, and again, I know the time period that he's speaking of. They were very influential these shows, like the OC, okay, Charmed. There was a number of them that were around then that would pick up songs. Less Than Jake we were on Dawson's Creek. We're on 90210. I still see residuals from those. It's not much, but you still see like your song was played on those shows. But it took money to get on those shows, or somebody that knew you, or some kind of favor. And it just seemed like the stars aligned. You know, Joel could write for the rest of his life and maybe never get a break like that. Same with me or anybody else. You don't know till you get your song out there.
Yeah, and sometimes this song's a pretty simple song, but sometimes the simplicity of a song is what can appeal to the listener. There's not a crazy amount of stuff to process. You referenced, those songs you hear as a kid, nursery rhymes, songs like that just get stuck in your head, and that song definitely has this quality.
Yeah, it's not overthought. Joel even said it. I said, could you go back and write a song like this? He's, he doesn't know. You don't know. He said it would probably come off as contrived. Anytime Less Than Jake, anytime I've ever tried to be like, you know what, I'm going to make this sound, or anytime a band ever says, hey, we're going back to our roots, it's going to sound like this, I go, uh-oh, because you can't go back. It's impossible. It is a time period in your life that you cannot recreate. I've thought about this, Chris, and I don't know if I've discussed it this articulately, but if I could do a factory reset on my musical knowledge, there's times when I wish I could do it and go back and be primal, have that instinct of I'm just going to this chord and I'm screaming whatever, and that's what it ends up being. And a lot of those whatevers end up being great. A lot of them, not so great.
Sure. I love that Joel said some of his favorite music is incredibly dumb music made by incredibly smart people. And what's funny about that is Joel was very much a fixture in that Lookout Records world. I thought that was the coolest thing in the world when I was a kid. I'm sure that you were a fan of Lookout Records and that world of bands. And I think you could say that about a lot of the songs that came out of that world.
Sure, yeah. And the one thing I do know about California during that time period is really, there was two games in town in terms of producers and networking. It was LA, California, and New York, okay? And I would hear these stories of bands. If I would have heard this back then, it would have been even more incredible. But like, think of David Foster, how he came into play with this. That would have never happened in Gainesville, Florida. Okay, we would have never known about David Foster, the Plus Ones, how they knew about someone else trying to lift their band name, the mastering with Bernie Grunman, having it cost that much money. That's a mistake of a young musician. You would find that out now, right?
Yeah, it's funny too. Like the amounts of money, yes, they are massive when you're a young punk rock band. Now it sounds like, oh, that doesn't sound bad to have this amazing person master your album for $3,000 or whatever. Not saying $3,000 isn't a lot, but for a big name person who's mastering Dr. Dre albums to master your album, it doesn't sound that crazy to me.
No. But back then, when you're on a shoestring budget, you're working some restaurant job, and there's no band fund. A band fund doesn't exist until you go make money, and there's money in the band. Oh, you made $100 at this show, so yeah, going back to that time period, an exorbitant amount of money, and remember, these were punk rock kids. Everything was on a shoestring budget. So when you got hit with a big bill, it was frightening.
Yeah, of course. And Chris, I had to go back onto that. What's that concert history or whatever that website where you can see all the shows.
Setlist FM.
No, not that one. The other one, like Concert History Archives.
Oh, Concert History. Okay.
Yeah,
yep.
I had to go back because I knew I played at the Troubadour before. I played at the Troubadour on February 15th of 2006 with Bayside, the Junior Varsity, and Sullivan. The day before that, we played at Soma in San Diego, and the day after was at Chain Reaction in Anaheim. So I had to find out the exact date of when I played at the Troubadour. You said Less Than Jake played at the Troubadour too?
We did. Yeah, we played the Troubadour in 1997. I think we played there one other time. Yeah, one we were there definitely once. I think twice, and if we were there 3 times, I don't remember.
Yeah, it is funny when you play these places that aren't that. I mean, from what I remember, that club wasn't some super fancy, nice club, was it?
No, No. I mean, that and the Roxy and the whiskey are just they're dive bars essentially, but they're iconic landmarks in Hollywood.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of bands and artists came through those doors, played that stage, and
everybody
did whatever else in those rooms. And I think that's kind of like the theme of this song in a way. He's this character that's playing at the Troubadour. And I thought this was a great episode, man. I told you Joel was going to be a great guest. I've been wanting to get him on for a long time.
He was great, and I can't wait to actually run into him in person and give him a hug and catch up a little bit more. But if you haven't already, head over to ChrisDeMakes.com. That's where our Patreon lives. You can sign up for bonus episodes of the After Party and all kinds of other goodies. ChrisDeMakes.com. Chris, you got a review for us this week.
I do have a review. I have a really funny one for you, Chris, because
all right,
I may have read this one on the show before, but I'm going to read it again because it's just perfect for this episode. So we got this one. We got 5 stars, and it says, great insight into the creative process, and said, one of my first listens every Monday. An outstanding production and the conversations about the craft of songwriting and the insights into the recording process behind these tracks is fascinating. I always learn something new. Chris, that review is from September of 2024 from Joel Reeder.
I didn't know where you were going with this. I love that Joel left that review. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Joel. Unfortunately, your check is not in the mail, but we can't help you pay. We can't help you pay for your recording all those years ago. But hey, Joel, if you're still with us, if you're still listening, it was a pleasure to reconnect with you. Not in person yet, but we got to catch up a little bit. And I want to thank Mr. Joel Reeder for sitting in this week, and we'll catch you next time. Hey friends, have you been loving Chris DeMakes a Podcast? Well, spread the love by leaving a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Don't hesitate to share what you enjoy about the show in an actual written review on Apple Podcasts. Not only does it help more people discover us, but we often read reviews in the wrap segment of the show. It's a quick, cost-free way to support us and takes just a minute of your time. Your reviews mean the world to us and help us keep the podcast thriving. Thank you for being a listener, and thank you for being a friend.
Hi, I'm Alex Goldman. You may know me as the host of Reply All, but I'm done with that. I'm doing something else now. I've started a new podcast called Hyperfixed. On every episode of Hyperfixed, listeners write in with their problems, and I try to solve them. Some massive and life-altering, and some so minuscule it'll boggle your mind. No matter the problem, no matter the size, I'm here for you. That's Hyperfixed, the new podcast from Radiotopia. Find it wherever you listen to podcasts or at hyperfixedpod.com.